currently I have 3 comic books that are vying for the top spot for comic book series of 2024. Transformers, Rook Exodus, and Conan the Barbarian. All 3 different publishers, Skybound. We've got Ghost Machine as well as Titan Comics. And I certainly have not given Conan the Barbarian and writer Jim Zub the flowers they deserve as being one of the best ongoing series for well over a year now. I will admit up front, I am very biased on this. Conan the Barbarian happens to be like my second favorite movie of all time. Conan the Cimmerian happens to be one of my favorite characters of all time. Probably my favorite hero just in media in general. I love Conan. In fact, one of my children is named Conan because I like the character that much. So I'm an enormous fan, and I am very, very hypercritical of Conan's stories. I praise stuff when it's good, but if it's not good, I certainly demonize it probably worse than it deserves. You don't have to get very far off the beaten path of good for me to be like, this sucks. Because what Robert E. Howard created with the Hyborian Age and Conan the Barbarian is absolutely phenomenal stuff. And I don't like seeing the character done wrong, and he's been done absolutely amazingly by Jim Zub and his creative team. And I'm going to give you 5 reasons that you should be reading this comic book that will absolutely grow hair on your balls. If it's stagnated, maybe it started to peek back in there and stuff, you will become more of a man after reading Conan the Barbarian from Titan Comics, because it's just that kind of comic book. It's that freaking good. Then I've got another bonus reason, because I like to have 6 for some reason, of why you should be supporting this comic book and why it's amazing, and why if you haven't jumped on the bandwagon, you're absolutely missing out. Number 1, this comic book can give you something, and I can promise you something that I can promise you essentially with no other comic book series out there. Jim Zub, the writer of Conan the Barbarian, is here long term. In fact, he announced it on his Substack newsletter, or maybe it's just a newsletter, that he's actually signed a multi-year agreement to continue writing Conan the Barbarian. He announced it earlier this year, and the number I was given was 3 years. He didn't announce that specifically, but I believe it's another 3 years, so we're going to be getting around 4 years at least of Jim Zub on Conan the Barbarian. And one of the things that I think just pisses me off about modern day comic books is you get a good writer in there, they start telling a story like, well, maybe like a Jeremy Adams on his Flash series, and then all of a sudden, as he gets his momentum and things are getting bigger and bigger, they take him off the book for no reason whatsoever. That will not happen with this comic book. If you like Jim Zub's version of Conan the Barbarian, and if you like Conan the Barbarian, I think you'll love it. He will be there long term. No other comic book series out there can give you that kind of guarantee, and I think that is almost more important than anything else that I can talk about in this particular video, lauding this amazing series, is that he will not be leaving abruptly to go start a Substack comic book or whatever. He's not just going to walk away, or Titan's not just going to fire him because they could bring somebody else in. He's committed long-term to the character in the series, and I think that's badass. Number 2, the art, specifically from Roberto De Lore, is simply fantastic. In my humble opinion, and I've read a lot of Conan the Barbarian comic books over the years, Barry Windsor Smith is without a doubt the greatest Conan the Barbarian artist of all times. And there have been lots of great artists on Conan the Barbarian, whether it be from Marvel, Dark Horse, Marvel, and now Titan. In my opinion, Roberto De Lore is firmly a number 2 behind Barry Windsor Smith. That's how good I think this comic book looks when Roberto De Lore is illustrating it. He does not illustrate everything. He does 4 issues, and then Doug Braithwaite comes in and does another 4 issues, and then Roberto comes back. Doug Braithwaite is also very, very good, but not quite to the level of Roberto De Lore, in my personal opinion. And it's it's action-packed, it's vibrant, it's furious, it's physical, it's violent, it's gory, it's sexy, it's all the things that a Conan the Barbarian comic book should be when you look at the visual stylings. And Roberto De Lore just has a fantastic feel for the character, the adventure settings, and of course he's going all over the place. You see him on ships, you see him in mountains, you see him in Antarctica, you see him on the grassy plains and all that kind of stuff. And he always looks completely badass. And when he goes into action and he brings his sword out, he's cutting people down on the regular. And when he sees a hot chick, he's bedding her on the regular. And it feels like what a Conan the Barbarian comic book should feel like. And I cannot give Roberto De Lore enough kudos for the fantastic work that he's done on there. It's probably the best illustrated comic book in the entire industry at this point. That's how good I think Roberto De Lore is on Conan the Barbarian. The second best artist ever on the character, only behind Barry Windsor Smith, maybe one of the top 5 artists in the history of comic books. I know that's subjective, but he's certainly in the running in my book. Number 3, this is something you certainly get out of maybe a Marvel Comics and maybe not so much out of Dark Horse, but this weird sense of being ashamed of who Conan the Barbarian is. That he is hyper-violent, that he is a character that's going out there and bedding every single hot chick that he comes into contact with, and therefore you get stuff kind of like, I don't know, a Jason Aaron take on Conan the Barbarian, which wasn't necessarily bad. The adventure stories, for the most part, were pretty good. There's definitely a lull in the middle of his series, but he does go PG Conan the Barbarian, and it doesn't work for the character. Jim Zub, Roberto De Lore, Doug Braithwaite, and Titan Comics are not ashamed of Conan being Conan. It's baked into the character, and that is who he is. He's not a mindless barbarian, but he's damn sure close to it, and he's definitely a man of action. And his actions are brutal. They're violent. He kills on the regular, and he certainly slays chicks on the regular too, and you will be getting all that and more within the Conan the Barbarian series from Titan, and I like that they're embracing who the character is, and they're not trying to water him down, trying to pussify him a little bit like we get with, I don't know, maybe a Batman these days. He's got to be more socially conscious. You know, we got to change the character up for a modern audience. This is not for a modern audience. This is for a Conan the Barbarian audience, the only audience that they should even be worried about when it comes to a comic book like this. And that's why I think so many Conan fans are absolutely in love with what they're doing at Titan Comics on this one. Another thing that I think they're doing very, very well is they are celebrating Robert E. Howard and his Hyborian age and the things that he created within Conan the Barbarian that have certainly stood the test of time. And Robert E. Howard was a visionary and really a genius in his own time. Unfortunately, he did die at a very, very young age. I believe he was 29. I think he took his own life. Basically, during the Great Depression, his mother got very, very ill. He took it bad, and unfortunately, he did kill himself. But he had a very distinct writing style. It was a very pulpy style because that's how most of the Conan the Barbarian comic books got out there. They were released in chapters in pulpy, magazines where you get them one chapter at a time. And Conan became obviously the most popular thing that he ever did. And he would jump around the life of Conan the Barbarian. Sometimes you would get him, in his younger days in Samaria. Sometimes you'd get him as a king. Sometimes you'd get him as an adventurer, mercenary guy in the middle. And he would bounce around time frames. And that's what this series does, which every Conan the Barbarian series should do. Once you get to the end of the line on whatever story it is, and Roberto De Lore steps aside and Doug Braithwaite comes in, you jump to another portion of his life. It's not a linear story, which some people might find a turnoff. But if you are a fan of Robert E. Howard and the works that he created and what he did with Conan the Barbarian, it's very, very familiar and it's quite appealing. And I love the fact that Jim Zub gets what Robert E. Howard was doing, that Jim Zub gets why people like the character, and he really does celebrate what Robert E. Howard was doing there, but not by just kind of copying him. A lot of people have done that, and certainly I have no problems with what a lot of Dark Horse did, where they took stories that were already out there and then translated them into comic books. But these are original stories that feel like they could have been written by Robert E. Howard, which I think probably is the greatest compliment I personally could give to Jim Zub, in his endeavor to create these comic books, that it feels so authentic to the character, and not only the character, but to the creator himself, that it ends up being a celebration of Robert E. Howard, which I definitely appreciate there. Another thing that I think a lot of people will appreciate is the Battle of the Blackstone going on right now. Robert E. Howard created a lot of characters outside of Conan the Barbarian. In fact, Conan wasn't the first character he created. It was Cole, the Atlantean. He was from a different age, I think like maybe 50,000 years before Conan or something like that. But in Battle of the Blackstone, we get a lot of the classic Robert E. Howard characters all coming together for an adventure together. Not Cole for some reason, but we do get Solomon Kane. We do get Black Agnes. We've got another character, El Borak and stuff. And they're all coming together for this awesome adventure. And obviously, Conan the Barbarian has been going out for a while from Titan. They waited about a year. Now they're doing a real cool crossover. But it's not enormous. It's just 4 issues. It's self-contained. And if you want to ignore Battle of the Blackstone, you can. but I don't think you should because it's really good. While it doesn't have Roberto De Lore art on it, it does have Jonas Scharf, and it looks like $1 million fucking dollars. And it's so cool getting to see these characters together that you really shouldn't be seeing together. And it's really fun to do that. And he even did a story earlier in Conan the Barbarian where Call and Conan basically get together. And that one is illustrated by Roberto De Lore. I would definitely highly suggest everyone seek that one out, maybe even first. That might be the best story that he's written so far. But Battle of the Blackstone is awesome. It's the type of crossover that comic book fans actually like. It feels like it's been earned. It's a whole lot of fun and adventures. It's characters that you wouldn't expect to be together, and it's executed to a very, very high level. And it's been very, very exciting thus far. And I've really enjoyed that one. And I like when you can do crossovers with characters that you never really expected, and they do them so well. You know, Jim Zub came up with a really inventive, creative idea to bring them together with this Blackstone sigil that's basically been placed on all these characters, and now they're kind of being hunted by these demons or whatever. That one's a lot of fun if you haven't checked it out yet. The final thing that I will give you, and this isn't so much Conan the Barbarian, but it certainly has to do with Jim Zub, the character of Conan, and Titan Comics themselves. There is a sister companion book, whatever you want to call it, called Savage Sword of Conan, a title that's certainly been in publication from Marvel and Dark Horse and all those publishers. And it's basically a anthology book, and you get multiple stories. Of course, you're going to get a Conan story or two in there. You might actually get some prose. You might get a poem. You're going to get some black and white comics featuring Solomon Kane, Cole, and all these other characters from Robert E. Howard. This is, without a shadow of a doubt, the best value in comic books themselves. There was actually an article talking about how expensive comic books have become. I think it was From Cover to Cover is the name of like the fan site or whatever. And they were breaking it down how much comic books cost per page. And this is the most affordable comic book, you know, that was sampled within there since like 2003, in over 20 years. It's 80 pages and it's basically $6 or $7. It's the best value in comic books, and you get awesome, really amazing Conan the Barbarian comic books and stories, short stories, all in black and white, but you also get that Solomon Kane stuff. You also get that Black Agnes stuff. You're also going to get some Brissa and some other characters like that. And it's absolutely phenomenal that they're able to create this with such a value added to it. Nobody else is doing anything quite like this. Even Spawn, which is awesome at $2.99, a great value there, isn't even quite the value that Savage Sword of Conan is. And I definitely salute Mr. Zub and the people in charge at Titan Comics for going out there and making something affordable, making something cool that gives people a chance to go in there, and it's like magazine format and all that stuff. And it's definitely something that stands out, is very, very cool. I don't really love anthologies, but when you put a value on them like that, I can take a story maybe not resonating with me if you're going to give it to me for that kind of price, and I can enjoy the other 3 or 4 stories. So that's what I'm talking about. Conan the Barbarian, the comic book series that will put hair on your balls. If you're not reading it, I think you're living your life wrong. I said it there. If you want to do it right, go out and get yourself some Conan the Barbarian by Jim Zub, Roberto De Lore, Doug Braithwaite. While you're at it, grab Battle of the Blackstone, and certainly while you're at it, grab the Savage Sword of Conan magazine-size thing. That is the very best value in comic books and has been in the last 20 years. Really cool stuff going on there, and I salute all those guys. You're doing a fantastic job. I finally gave you your flowers. You deserve all the credit in the world. If you enjoy this kind of stuff, you know, takes on comic books, whether it be good or bad, and you would like to support what we're doing here on Think Critical YouTube, I do want to invite you to come visit me on Think Critical Patreon, because we do talk about Conan the Barbarian every single week that it comes out on the Hot or Not podcast with Jim, at least. There's a link in the video description if you're interested in supporting Think Critical Patreon. We got lots of extra podcasts, videos, polls, all that kind of stuff there. Hope to see you there real soon, and I hope you are supporting Conan the Barbarian.